Welcome to the Mundus Fractura Law Guide. This week on Law Guide, we will take a deeper look at the Blee. Blee, along with their distant cousins, the gelatinous cubes, are one of the two sentient gelatinous species of Mundus Fractura. With the exception of the Great Crater, these semi-solid gelatinous humanoids exist across the lands of the planet, though they generally prefer and can be found in greater numbers near to the more humid environments of lakes, rivers, and the coastal regions of the planet. It is widely accepted that Blee are descended from an aquatic species and share a distant common ancestor with the planet's modern-day jellyfish, having left the ocean for reasons unknown, evolving over the aeons to exist on land. As was noted in our Law Guide on the Western Alliance champions, Blee are most often clear, near colorless, and range in opacity from transparent to semi-transparent. The Blee typically have 5 possible genders, not that the concept is all too important to them as a society or individuals. As far as the act of sexual congress goes, a typical Blee is polyamorous and pansexual, though it is also not uncommon for some Blee to live a life of quite chastity. But from the perspective of biology and breeding, it's rather complicated. In very simple terms, think of the 5 dominant Blee genders as 2 separate possible mating pairs. 2 types of males, known in the Blee language, Otoko and Yatsu. 2 types of females, Josei and Redi. Then the 5th is a surrogate gestator, known as Obun. Otoko may procreate with Redi to create viable fertile offspring. Josei may procreate with Yatsu with the same results, and both pair types require an Obun to gestate their fertilized egg. The resulting offspring will share genetic traits from all 3 parents. Blee are sexually mature at birth, but they do not reach mental maturity and full adult size until about 2 years of age. They are also fertile and able to participate in procreation until death. Now, remember, I said it's rather complicated. Not unlike their distant cousins the jellyfish, Blee need not even reproduce sexually. In addition to their humanoid forms, Blee have a less evolved, non-sentient polyp stage. Typically, this polyp will grow from the single cell egg once fertilized and implanted in the Obun. Within 15 standard months, the polyp will grow and develop into a Blee child, known as ephora. At birth, the ephora will basically walk out of its host gestator, separating from it as a fully formed yet small Blee about the size of a typical 3-year-old human child. Regarding Blee asexual reproduction, in times of extended solitude, or when there is an imbalance in availability of correct mating partners, Blee have been known to be instinctually compelled to find a warm, damp, and shady environment. Adults who give in to this compulsion will fall into a torpor and within a few days will revert back through the ephora stage and then rapidly shrink to the polyp stage. At this point, the now mindless and fully instinctual polyp will affix itself to a stable surface. The polyp will grow itself to the size of a typical adult humanoid Blee. The asexual reproduction process is an exceptionally rapid one. When the polyp reaches full size, in about 3 to 6 months, it will output its first new ephora, always an Obun. As it grows to maturity, the ephora Obun will remain to care for the polyp and its future progeny, in intervals of 2 to 3 months. The mindless parent polyp will further produce at least one of each male type, Otoko and Yatsu, and one of each female type, Josei and Redi. Between each of those births, there will be an additional Obun birth. The polyp will spawn a minimum of 8 offspring, though many times it is significantly more. In the case of imbalances in populations, the polyp will always produce more ephora after the initial 8. Driven by pheromones, These additional births will be of the types needed to bring balance to the community's breeding status. Driven by triggers unknown, once the polyp has fulfilled its charge, it will liquefy over the course of its final day and will be an inert puddle of fluid by that midnight. For most non-Jew Blee, it is not easy to visually identify an individual's physical age. The quarry and mycelium seem to be able to do it at a glance. But for all of the other sentient species of Mundus, even their distant cousins, the gelatinous cubes, it is a mystery. It is known that individuals as old as 50 years are not uncommon. A peculiar and semi-frequent genetic impulse makes knowing an individual's age incredibly difficult. They have a tendency to gather in hibernaculum pools of several merged individuals in times of stress, drought, and cold snaps. These group hibernations can be triggered by even short-term environmental effects. A hibernation cycle can last for as little as a few days or as long as several years. Fascinatingly, upon emergence from these periods of communal hibernation, an individual's gender may be different than when they entered into the union. As I said, these events are semi-frequent, and thus a single Jew Blee may live out its natural life as any or all of the 5 genders. It may even at some point trigger its own demise by becoming a mindless giant production polyp. Superficially, Jew Blee society resembles that of most sentient mammalian humanoids, though this is partly due to a shared cultural exposure, but also because they do naturally operate day to day in a similar manner to sentient mammalian humanoids. They own shops, become craftspeople, or artists. They go to local barn dances, or become bankers. They will raise animals, or till fields. All the things you would expect to see walking down a human, dwarven, elven, or halfling street, you will see in a Jew Blee community. It will feel familiar and relatable. But as was made clear by their function of procreation, on close inspection, Jew Blee are remarkably different. As a simple yet striking example, the Jew Blee take a deep and instinctual offense to the notion of doors for the use by individuals, and most specifically, a horrid offense to any passageway intended for life forms that seal. Doors for the use of removing or adding objects or cargo are acceptable. They are just temporary walls, just not doors for living creatures. Let me explain. A traditional Jew Blee dwelling would not have a front door. Instead, they have what would be best described as mail slots in human terms. The front of a Jew Blee home would typically have a slot in its front, raised above the ground by about the height of an average banana. The slots range in size, but typically are about 3 adult human fingers tall, by approximately the length of a standard elven forearm. Pests such as rodents and insects are kept out by the slight acidic residue left by the slot's regular use. This film is harmful, or at the very least unpleasant, to most common household nuisances. Further, as part of this residue, the Jew Blee are able to leave chemical markers, pheromones, to indicate to others if they are open to receiving guests. They are a highly social people, and uninvited guests are a frequent occurrence. The term uninvited is almost unknown in the Jew Blee culture. As a related aside, borrowing items from individual to individual without prior notice or awareness typically is an accepted practice. It is not considered stealing to a Jew Blee, provided you leave a note and it can fit through the domicile's front slot. It will often take individuals who join a mixed-species society from Jew Blee-only societies some time to overcome these cultural differences. So don't be alarmed if your new Jew Blee friend pops by uninvited, or if you find a note thanking you for the use of your toothbrush, which will be returned next week. Jew Blee are generally kind, giving, and communal people. A fascinating species, rich in depth and lore. Unfortunately, it is all far more than we can relate in this short overview, and so that is all for this time. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for future lore guide shorts, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.